Hello, my name is Albert McDowell. Welcome to this week's show on the Literary Critics Club. This week, the topic will consist of Anton Chekhov. For this show, we have an exclusive interview with Vlad Ugoslav from Eastern Albania, an expert on Chekhov. Here he is.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure for you to be on our show.
Welcome, all viewers. Today we have an opportunity to learn more about Anton Chekhov. Who was this man, this enigma, this man who is called the father of the modern short story, the Shakespeare of the 20th century, and the standard by which all literary effort must be measured? Who was this man, this Russian serf turned writer, this man who wrote over 200 short stories, many famous ones, and who's had a dramatic and influential impact on authors such as Ernest Hemingway, Arthur Conan Doyle? Let's take a closer look at his life, and I'll show you a timeline. Anton Chekhov was born January 16, 1860, in the small Russian village of Taganrog. Now, Anton was born differently than most of the Russian contemporary authors before him. You see, Anton had barely gone out of serfdom. It was actually Chekhov's grandfather who had bought the family freedom from a wealthy Russian landlord. And this is different, and it influenced Chekhov greatly. For instance, later Chekhov would write to his friend and publisher, Alexei, about the difficult process by which he had squeezed the slave's blood out of himself in order to attain self-respect and independence as a man and an author. Now, Chekhov was born into a family with 2 older brothers and 3 younger ones. It was a difficult life for him, but the first 8 years of his life, it was fairly uneventful. It was when Chekhov would turn 8 years old that he had his first real crisis. It was at this point that Chekhov's father, Pavel, would lose his business. Pavel had been in the business of groceries, and at this point, his business went bad. It went bankrupt. Now, in order to avoid debtor's prison, which he would have to go to since his business went bankrupt and he could no longer pay taxes, Pavel had to go to Moscow in order to find work and to feed his impoverished family. It was at this point that the crisis occurred. You see, while Pavel went to Moscow, Chekhov and the rest of his family stayed in Taganrog. And while there, they leaned on a corrupt official, corrupt as they would find out later, because the official would pose as a family friend, but then later turn on them and kick them out of their house. It was this experience of being turned on by a corrupt official that would cause Chekhov to write the book Late Blooming Flowers, whose focus is the same. It's nearly identical. It's about losing the home to a corrupt official. One of the main reasons that Anton Chekhov began writing was a need to help feed his impoverished family. His father Pavel's job just wasn't bringing enough money, and so Chekhov began his first attempts at writing. These early attempts were comics aimed at lowbrow humor in the lower to middle class people of the Russian. Leo Tolstoy and the works of his were the prime influence on Anton Chekhov's life and writing until about 1890. It was at 1890 that Anton Chekhov visited the penal colony on the eastern Siberian island off of Sakhalin, and he was to take a census of the people living under the harsh island conditions, interview the government officials there, and write a report on the overall situation within the colonies of the prisoners. It was there that Chekhov saw suffering that he had never seen before. The suffering on a Russian penal colony, it was a large scale. It was on such a large scale that Chekhov was shocked. He found that he could no longer reconcile himself to the moral code of Leo Tolstoy, the idealism that Tolstoy represented. He just couldn't reconcile himself to it any longer. It was at this point that Chekhov became more realistic in his writings. This is evident in that most of his stories from this time on take on a more somber tone and repeatedly explore the darker side of life. This can be seen, for instance, in his short story called Misery. Misery is, as the title sounds, a pretty miserable story. It's the story of a character that denies the badness of mankind all of his life, only to discover at the end of his life that mankind is actually bad, and soon finds himself incapable of continuing his existence. It is miserable. And this story, as well as others, represent the changing in Chekhov's lifestyle and his view on life, and his outlook in his writing. And the stories become more somber, as I said earlier. Cut. On July 2nd, 1904, Anton Chekhov uttered his famous last words, "Ich sterbe," which means, "I am dying," when translated into English. Chekhov died after only 44 years of life due to complications from tuberculosis. But those 44 years of life that he lived had a large impact on the short story authors of today. Short story authors such as Ernest Hemingway, Franz Kafka, and Catherine Ann Porter are today indebted to Chekhov for his innovations in the short story, as well as playwrights such as George Bernard Shaw, a Western playwright who his style is based off of Anton Chekhov's innovations in the play as well. These people are indebted to Chekhov. He was a critical Russian writer. He introduced a new style, and today the style of his writing has taken us from what it was then to what it is today. That is the life of Anton Chekhov.